Dan Delmar in for Aaron Rand. Jimmy Carter dying yesterday at the age of 100. So he was born in 1924, served one term as the U.S. president, and he'll be laid to rest on January 9th. The President Biden, current President Biden, is going to give his eulogy, and he'll be laid to rest with some public viewings in both Atlanta and D.C. Let's get to know more about Jimmy Carter and his legacy. Arthur Milnes is a speechwriter and he's authored many books on presidents, including two about Jimmy Carter, Jimmy and Rosalynn Carter, and 98 Reasons to Thank Jimmy Carter. Arthur Milnes joins us right now. Hello, sir.
Hey, thank you so much for your interest in what you're doing to honor President Carter.
Our pleasure. I think we got the right guest for the occasion. We can't get all through 98 Reasons, of course, but what do you think are the major planks of Jimmy Carter's legacy?
I could have written a book with 1,000 reasons to thank Jimmy Carter, but instead of just 98 reasons. But there's so many, but I think if forced to name a few, I would start with particularly considering the troubles in the Middle East right now that have been going on since October 7th. And let's remember that Jimmy Carter risked his very presidency, and he put it on hold, and he brought the Prime Minister of Israel and the President of Egypt together at Camp David. And that treaty, that peace that was forged between Israel and Egypt still stands today, 45 years later. And just think of the thousands of lives that have been saved between those once warring countries. I think of, after he left the White House, I think of the fact that when he and Mrs. Carter started to focus on fighting guinea worm disease, a horrible parasitic disease in the developing world. There were 4.5 million cases a year when they started. Well, he always has said that he wanted to live until the last case. There was no more cases. And last year, there were only 3. So I suspect this year there'll be none. And in so many ways, Jimmy Carter, he won that final battle.
And when we talk about humble beginnings, I mean that's an understatement with this president.
Well, he was from a tiny village a tiny town, in southwest Georgia, but he actually wasn't from humble beginnings. His father was quite successful, and he grew up in a house that had a tennis court, even so.
Wow.
It's quite interesting, and most importantly, I think, remember, he's growing up during the era of the Jim Crow era and segregation, and his father most definitely didn't believe that the races should be joined as one, and through his life, Jimmy Carter was able to rise above that, and spent particularly he surprised all of Georgia when the very first word he said when sworn in as governor is the time for racism in Georgia is over. And in 1971, that was a pretty radical statement for a white Georgian to say. And so just a remarkable legacy, and it all began in a tiny little place called Plains.
Wow, and he was very liberal, very progressive for his time as well. What are some other elements of his legacy that you think were ahead of their time in that sense?
Oh, everybody today thinks that it's just today that leaders have discovered the environment. Well, Jimmy Carter, he was fighting those battles for a better environment, 50 years ago. And one thing folks are recalling is he installed solar panels on the White House, and he went on delivered national addresses where he proposed, quote, radical things like turn down your thermostat. Right? And yes, he was so far ahead of the curves on so many things. But I wanted to say one thing. A lot of people think or describe Carter as, for lack of a better word, right-wing. Left-wing, I apologize. And what I've always loved about him, and in so many ways he represents my own politics, is the fact that you can't put Jimmy Carter into a box. He used to call himself a very conservative progressive. And some of the fights against the deficit and stuff that Ronald Reagan got credit for was actually Jimmy Carter who fought to turn America's finances around, not the Republicans. So they're very, very fascinating legacy. And even if you looked at, say, Habitat for Humanity and his wonderful work there, it's fundamentally a conservative idea. Here, where the person receiving the house would have to provide what Habitat would call sweat labor. The community came together as volunteers and as donors to build these houses, and there was no government at all, no government involved. And so I've always liked him because of that you can't put him in a box, neither right nor left. But you can put him in, and boy, could we use his example today in both Canada, the United States, and throughout the Western world. He treated his enemies not as enemies, but fellow countrymen who had a different approach to getting to the same goal. And famously, he and Gerald Ford.
Writer Arthur Milnes joins us. 2 books on Jimmy Carter, Jimmy and Rosalynn Carter, as well as 98 Reasons to Thank Jimmy Carter. On Habitat for Humanity, that's what a lot of the, I'm a little younger, so that's my memory of Jimmy Carter is him as a senior helping to build homes. I want to say well into his 90s. I mean, he was out there in recent years, right?
Oh, totally. My wife, in fact, went to Haiti with them some years ago. For a 2-week Habitat build, and Allison can tell you better than I. But there was no Mr. President and fancy accommodations when the Carters were on a Habitat build, even in a challenging place such as Haiti. They were up first, and they wielded hammers and climbed roofs just like everybody else. And Allison, who was half their age, she said just watching them, you got exhausted. So they truly put their money where their mouths were on so many issues.
Lastly, a quick thought about the relationship between Jimmy and Rosalynn. What are your thoughts there? They had a very strong marriage, it seems like.
Yeah, it's probably the most remarkable partnership between a political couple that's ever been seen. They were married 77 years, and Jimmy Carter always said, and Mrs. Carter always said in return, nothing they accomplished would have ever been without the other. It's like I said, again, generations ahead of so many else. Mrs. Carter, and she got flack for this, and so did the president. She used to attend cabinet meetings, and she embarked on her own projects at the White House. Particularly, her passion was mental health and lifting stigma. Well, she and President Carter had been working on that since the 1960s together.
Wow.
Always together.
Wow. And to talk about mental health then, I mean, we're only starting to do campaigns now here on this radio station in the past decade or so. But wow, that's ahead of its time for sure. Any parting thoughts on how or what specifically we should remember of Jimmy Carter?
Just his political and personal courage. There was no wrong that he saw that he wouldn't take great risks and put himself in the firing line to try to right. And there's a lesson for all of us in that. He came from nowhere, and from a very young age, he decided he was going to make a difference and make a better world, and by God, he sure succeeded.
Arthur Milnes, pleasure speaking with you. He is an editor and author of 2 books on Jimmy Carter. One is called Jimmy and Rosalynn Carter, and the other, 98 Reasons to Thank Jimmy Carter. Thanks so much for your expertise. Pleasure speaking with you.
Great pleasure, and thanks for honoring President Carter.